to the Tangerine Knits Podcast. My name is Ichi. I live in Virginia and I love to knit. And I am super excited to bring to you a very cozy fall episode. I know I haven't posted in quite a while again, but that just means I have so many finished objects and whips to show you all at once. I think I've got 6 finished objects. I've got at least 2 sweaters, a cardigan, a slipover, a pair of socks, and a pumpkin. So I'll just have to, show you everything I've been working on over the past month or two in one episode. So I hope you're up for that. I've been traveling a little bit in October. I visited Japan with my partner. It's kind of been like a dream trip for us to go on for several years, even before the pandemic. So I was really, really grateful to finally get to do that. And I have a couple of pretty exciting acquisitions from that I'll show you. Not too many, but some are very, very exciting, at least to me. So I will show that. I haven't really done an acquisition segment in quite a while, so I will catch you up on everything there as well. And yeah, it's been really beautiful around here. It's fall. It is kind of, we're in my neighborhood at least towards the tail end of the beautiful fall foliage, so it's starting to slide into winter, but I'm still trying to enjoy fall for as long as I can. And with that said, I'm going to get started with my knits. So the first thing is going to be this piece that I'm wearing, which is my quintessential dream fall knit that I've been wanting to knit for months and months and months. So this is the Amy Slipover by Sandnes Garn. It's in the 2202 Migtildama magazine booklet thing that's been super popular for several years now. So I may be a little bit late to that bandwagon, but I finally got a hold of that magazine. I think I showed it in my very last video. And I was just really excited to knit this piece in particular. I knew I wanted to knit it in a brown, and that's what I did. It's very cozy. I haven't really worn it out much yet, but it feels great to try it on at home. And I'm really excited to get to start wearing it out, maybe under my coats, or even just over a short sleeve tee or a long sleeve tee, over a dress, something like that. It would be really nice. So I did knit this using a different yarn than specified in the pattern. The pattern calls for 1 strand of the Sandnes Garn Sunday with 1 strand of their tin silk mohair. And I didn't really want to use a mohair in this piece because of this big chunky collar. I figured I wanted to use something that's just a wool because it's kind of all up in my face and I'm a little bit sensitive to certain mohairs. So I ended up choosing the Cascade Eco Merino DK in the color dark chocolate. And I wish I had more of the skein to show you, but I literally used up every last little bit of this yarn. I definitely ended up playing yarn chicken, even though I didn't mean to, based on the yardage I calculated. But it's okay. It all worked out. I'm going to stand up so you can maybe see it a little bit better. There is this big chunky folded 2x2 rib collar, and then on the side there are these very long double rib or 2x2 rib ties that ties on the side and finishes with a nice 2x2 rib as well. These ties are quite long actually. I think in the end, the amount of yarn it took to knit these ties was maybe a quarter of the total yarn that I used for the whole project, front, back, and the neck. So these ties were definitely a labor of love, but I kind of knew that going in. I'd seen some other folks talk about their experience knitting this slipover, so I kind of was mentally prepared for the massive amount of ribbing that I knew I would have to knit to get this beautiful piece. So in terms of the construction, you start with knitting the back, and then you pick up along the shoulder to knit the front 2 pieces and then knit the front, and then after that you pick up stitches around the neck to knit this collar, this very large collar, and then you do a provisional crochet cast on for the freestanding part of the ties, and then you pick up along the armholes all around, and then cast on more stitches for the other side of the freestanding ties, and then knit rib for days and days and days and miles and miles and miles. So the modification that I made in this pattern, for one, I used a different yarn, and this yarn actually had a different gauge. So the pattern had a 23 stitch gauge, but my stitch gauge was more 18. So based on that, I just adapted the stitch count by 82% or something like that, whatever is the proportion of my stitch gauge to the pattern stitch gauge, because this pattern comes in only one size and I didn't want it to come out massively. So I just, use that factor to multiply the stitch counts by, and knitted a final piece that I think fits some pretty similar on me as I think it looks like in the pattern photos. I think I also maybe adjusted this shoulder section a little bit so that there are a few more stitches between the neck collar opening and then this edge garter rib decorative detail. So this part is a little bit wider proportionally than called for in the pattern. Obviously, I had to round a little bit just to make sure everything matched up. I did end up drawing everything out in a schematic before I started knitting, because in the past, I've tried to just like very simply adapt stitch counts, but sometimes it ended up not matching. Like certain things have to be fixed. Like for example, I wanted to keep this decorative garter thing at the stitch count that it was, and so I had to kind of adjust the rest of the stitch count to make sure the overall measurements are still relatively the same, if that makes sense. So there was a little bit of knitting maths involved, but nothing too complicated, and at least the construction itself is pretty straightforward, so I didn't really have too much trouble with that. And the other modification I made was I was knitting on this tie when I was on the train. I took Amtrak to Philly to go to a friend's wedding and figured I'd just really get as much ribbing knitting done as I could. And I had followed the pattern recommendation to knit, I think 5 centimeters of rib or something like that. And I had done that, bounded off the stitches. And then when I was working on the other tie, I realized it doesn't look like I have that much yarn left. I wonder if I'll have enough. I decided to trust the process because when I was doing my yardage calculations, I thought for sure that I had more than enough. And lo and behold, I had ran out of yarn for knitting the other ties. I think I'd only got to maybe 3 centimeters or something like that before I ran out of yarn. And then I was scrounging for the yarn tails to splice onto the yarn to try to make it go as far as I could, but of course it wasn't going to make up for 2 centimeters of this very, very long rib. And so I did look into whether I can get more yarn in this dye lot, but unfortunately the website I got it at, which is Wool and Company, they didn't have any more of this dye lot. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to frog part of the first tie that I made. So I undid the ribbing and only knitted this up to I think 4 centimeters in width, and then used the rest of that yarn to finish this side. So they're both 4 centimeters, which is a centimeter short, less wide, more narrow than the pattern called for. But I think it ends up looking okay. It's not, obviously very short or anything, or very narrow or anything like that. So works for me. It's worked out okay. Yeah, I think that's all there is to say about the pattern. The yarn I actually liked a lot. To tell you a little bit about my thought process for choosing this yarn. So at first, I already mentioned I wanted to choose an alternative that didn't have mohair. So based on the 23 stitch gauge, I thought maybe a sport weight yarn could work fairly nicely. And so I looked at first for a color in the Juniper Moon Farms Organic Patagonia Merino, which is a yarn that I really like. I used it for my Lume sweater and just absolutely adore the way it feels, and I thought that could be really nice. But I did notice that given the yarn that the pattern calls for, which is 1 strand of merino, 1 strand of tin silk mohair, the gauge of 23 stitches sounds pretty dense, because other patterns that I see and have knitted using the same combination is usually at a 19 stitch gauge, like my vest number 2 spring edition, or other patterns I've seen call for up to a 21 stitch gauge. So I thought 23 stitch gauge, given that the pattern wanted you to knit the stitches at a pretty densely. And so I thought that maybe a sport weight wouldn't quite cut it, because I think at a 23 stitch gauge, a sport weight would probably be still fairly roomy. So I kind of try to think about other yarns I could use. And this yarn, this Eco Merino DK, I actually already had one skein in my stash, because at the end of last year, I had bought this yarn both in a cream neutral color and then also in this brown color, to knit the Hete sweater, which is a contrast circular yoke sweater. And I hadn't gotten to it quite yet, and at this point I'm not sure if that's really in the works for me to knit this year. And so looking at this color, which I only had one ball of because I wanted to use it as the contrast color, I actually liked it a lot, and I had swatched with it and really loved the way the swatch turned out, especially after blocking. It just really smoothed out and feels like almost kind of velvety in the way that it feels. I really liked it, and so I thought, maybe I'll just go ahead and get 2 more skeins and see if I can make that work for this one, because knowing how much ribbing there is, I figure that knitting at a bigger stitch gauge could only maybe act to my benefit because it's fewer stitches to knit. So it ended up working out. I was surprised actually that I was able to get more yarn in the exact dye lot, because I had gotten this, like I said, at the end of last year, so the end of 2022, and I thought for sure that maybe they wouldn't have the same dye lot and I would just have to, do some helical knitting or some type of color management, but I was really surprised when they said that they actually did have the same dye lot. So I thought it was kind of fate, and so I figured going with this color and this yarn for this pattern couldn't go wrong. And yeah, I'm very pleased with it. Like I said, the yarn changed a lot after it was blocked. So pre-blocking, when I was holding this up, even when I was showing it in my last video, I thought that it felt like it looked very stiff pre-blocking, and I was a little bit nervous, but since I'd blocked my swatch, I knew I could kind of trust the process, that it's going to block out to be really nicely. And yeah, the drape is quite nice and soft as well. So I think it was a pretty good yarn substitution, if I do say so myself. And it ended up being a more economical option for yarn as well. So this is my Amy Slipover. I'm so excited to wear it. The color is so fall. It's my favorite, most suitable shade of brown for me, I feel like. It's called dark chocolate, and I think it's super apt. And if you look at the yarn up close, there's little heathered bits of even red in here. So I think technically this is undyed. So whatever sheep is this beautiful mixture of colors, I am just very intrigued. Sounds like a very cool looking sheep. So yeah, I am really glad I finally got to knit this. It took me a long time to even find the pattern booklet, because it wasn't super widely sold and it was hard to get a hold of in the United States. And also it just took me a while to get the right yarn for it. So, and now at long last, I have this piece and I'm really excited. Like I said, I think it's my most quintessential fall piece that has been long awaited for me. So I'm really glad that I get to wear it now. All right, next up is another very exciting and long-awaited piece. So this is something that I've been working on since April, I think, not consistently. I basically started it towards the middle/end of spring, and then when the weather really got warm, I just kind of lost excitement to work on it, because I knew I'd never really get to wear it for several months later, because it was getting way too hot to wear a alpaca cardigan. So if you may have seen this on my channel before. This is the Gioia cardigan by Sandrine C, I think aka Quiet Hours. It is this gorgeous cardigan with a lace paneling detail in the front. So the construction is a saddle shoulder, and this is my first time knitting a saddle shoulder, and I was just very, very excited to try it out. So you can see a close-up of the shoulder panel. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. It also has a compound raglan, so the raglan's rates of increases varies as you go down the yoke, so it's not just a constant rate of increases. And I think overall it results in a really, really nice fit. I think I had a little bit of trouble in the beginning just because I think I was kind of multitasking while knitting the lace panel, so I got a little bit off track in the beginning, but once you figure it out, the lace panel is actually pretty intuitive to knit. The chart is really clear. The designer provides a different chart for the left and the right panels, which I know they're mirrored, but it was still kind of nice for them to provide just 2 sets of charts so you can look at both. The button band is also knit as you go, so there was not really a whole lot of finishing that was needed at the end, which is always appreciated. Speaking of the buttons, this is a little bit of a preview into my acquisitions, but I did get these buttons from Japan. I'll try and give you a better view of it, but Yes, they are from this store that I'll tell you more about, but it was just the most like amazing store I'd ever seen. They're just a room, like a floor, half a floor, full of buttons, drawers and drawers of buttons, and each button has like every size organized in little compartments. And when you know what you want, you can just bring the whole drawer, like a little small drawer, to the front desk, and then they would give you the amount that you need in a cute little bag, and you go on from there. Everything was so organized, and I had a great time looking at just like all of the buttons that they had, and I knew that I wanted to pick out a button for this specific cardigan, and I was really glad I found what I needed. The finish on these buttons are just so stunning. I wish I could get all my buttons from that store in the future, but I figured there was no point in like stockpiling buttons because I don't really know what size or color I need. So I do have another set of buttons for another garment I planned, but these are the only 2 sets of buttons that I got for now, and I was very happy about that. But back to this cardigan, I knitted this using 2 strands of Juniper Moon Farms Herriot Fine, which is an alpaca nylon blend. I have a bit of the yarn left over, so I can show that to you. Okay, here is one of the balls of yarn that I have left. I actually have quite a bit left. I knew that I wanted to hold it double-stranded, and I should mention this was one of the things I got on sale from my local yarn store for like half off. So I knew I wanted to hold it double, so I got 6 skeins. I figured I'd probably only need 5, but I didn't want to risk like running out because, you know, I didn't know where else I could easily get yarn in this dye lot, in this color in this dye lot. So to be on the safe side, I just got 6 skeins. And the composition of this yarn is 75% alpaca, 25% polyamide, and it is 459 yards per 100 grams. So there's like quite a bit of yardage here. And I was kind of on an emotional roller coaster with this yarn. When I was first knitting it, I was like so excited. I really liked that there's kind of this fuzzy halo, but it's not too pronounced. It's not like an in-your-face type of halo the way that mohair might be. But then after a while, I was like, you know what, this feels kind of heavy compared to some of my wool garments, especially compared to like any mohair garments. And I think that the nylon and the alpaca doesn't quite have the same elasticity that wool does because, or for whatever reason, my stitches aren't the most even. And from far away especially, or not from far away, from close up especially, I feel like you can see a lot of just unevenness in my stitches. And overall, I was just a bit afraid that this isn't really a great yarn for a garment. But after I finished it, you know, I think it's fine. It still looks really cute. It's definitely a different type of vibe as if I use a wool and mohair, which is what the pattern originally calls for. But I still like the way it looks. So it's all right. It was kind of an interesting yarn to use. Would I use it again for a cardigan? I don't know, but I do like this yarn. I think if I was a shawl knitter, this would be great for like a shawl. But I don't know. I do have a lot left. Like I said, I have 170 grams or something like that, spread out between like several, like 4 partially used balls of yarn. So it is enough to make something else, like maybe a hat, maybe some type of accessory. So I'll definitely hold on to it and see. But you know, after accidentally playing yarn chicken, I never like really intend to. It's better to have more yarn than to not have enough. So it is all right. Something else about this piece is that it kind of turned me on to twisted rib. I think I never really felt like I loved the way twisted rib looks. I don't know why, but this pattern called for it, both on the neck edge and then the cuffs and then also the hem. And looking at it as part of this piece, I just think it looks really, really beautiful. So maybe I will knit more twisted rib in the future. So yeah, this is my this is my Gioia cardigan. I had mostly finished almost everything before I fully stopped when the weather turned warm. I think I had finished both sleeves and just had some of the body to do because I wanted to block everything to figure out how long I wanted to make it. I'd always heard that alpaca blocks out by a huge amount, and so I really wanted to avoid like a hugely unpredicted like garment size, and so I blocked several times. I think I blocked after I finished one sleeve, and then I blocked again after I thought I finished the body, and determined that I wanted to knit just a couple more lace repeats and then before I finish the rib. Okay, I just went and put on this cardigan so you can see how it fits on. And yeah, I really like it. I think it's got a good amount of ease for me where it feels relaxed, but it's not like super boxy, because a cardigan like this, I don't think I'd want it to be super boxy. I think the buttons just look so great. I will say that there's a button here on the very, very top, and it's quite heavy. So when I just leave it like this, it very much just drapes like this. So I might consider removing this button or using like a smaller one, or I guess I could just tuck it in like this so it doesn't fall. I'm not sure how often I would button it like all the way up where I'd actually want this button. But yeah, I think the one thing is that I don't know how this really looks. I can't actually see from the camera, so maybe I'll just look at the footage, but I probably wouldn't really button it up all the way. So yeah, I'll have to think about if I wanted to keep this very top button or just, I don't know, let it do its thing over there. So in terms of where it hits, it's right, it's actually quite a little bit below my belly button, which is what I wanted. I didn't want it to like be too short, but yeah, I really like it. I think the shoulder fits quite nicely. The neck feels nice. It's not really a boat neck, but I feel like this shape is pretty flattering. And yeah, it's very cozy, comfortable. I'm really enjoying it. I think this could be a good winter piece too, actually. It's obviously not super thick, but because it's white, I don't know if winter whites are a thing, but I think of wearing white in the winter as a thing. I don't know. You can tell me if that's not right, but I think you should just wear whatever color you want at any time that you want. So yeah, that is my Gioia cardigan. We can move on to the next garment, which I'll also put on so you can see how it looks. So give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. This is my third finished object that I'm showing this episode, and yes, it is a Cumulus blouse. I know everyone's made one of these, and I was a skeptic for so long because it's such a simple pattern, but everyone just keeps talking about how great it is and how nice of a fit it is, and I just kind of really was curious about what the hype could possibly be. And what do you know, I actually really love it as well. The reason I knitted this was actually because I wanted to get some old yarn out of stash. So I'll start with the yarn. The yarn that I wanted to get out of stash is this one, which is Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in this color Sage Green. I had bought a sweater quantity of this color because I had wanted to buy the rust color to knit my Cassia square neck, which is a piece that I talked about in my first episode ever on this podcast. And of course, there was some type of promotion or whatever where if you buy like 10 skeins, you get some type of discount. And so I always get got by those things. And so I bought 2 sweater quantities of a yarn that I've never ever worked with, touched, seen, anything at all. So it was a bit of a risk, but it's honestly not a very expensive yarn at all. It's quite affordable, so it was okay. I figured it was worth the risk and helps justify the shipping I had to pay to get it to me. So I, like I said, used the rust color for the Cassia square neck. But then this color, I think, was just not quite what I expected online. It just looks a little bit too light for me. And based on my experience knitting the Cassia square neck, I wasn't the craziest about this yarn based on the way I knitted it for that garment, which was single-stranded and at a fairly tight gauge. I think I used like 4mm needles or something like that. I'll look it up and put it on the screen if that's not correct. But anyway, I kept holding this up against my skin and just not loving the way it looks. And then I had the idea of holding it with something else, like a different color. Well, first I had the idea to just hold it with something else because I was swatching with just this and some sock yarn, like white or neutral colored sock yarn that I had. And I found that I did like the texture of this yarn held with another yarn better than this yarn held by itself. I know plenty of people knit this by itself, and I think it's okay, but it's just not my favorite. And so why spend so much time knitting something when you know that there's something that it's going to bother you about it. So I decided to hold it actually with this yarn, which is a lace weight merino. This is or I don't know if it's merino. It might be. This is the Malabrigo lace in the color Sapphire Green. And I held these together to make this color. So you can kind of see that the overall vibe is still kind of similar to this sage green, but it's just a little bit darker and more vibrant. So one of the issues I had with this color, with this yarn for my Cassia square neck, is that I just felt like the color looked a bit too faded. I really haven't washed it or worn it too many times, but it just looks as though it's been washed so many times that the dye is all gone. And so in order to like give it a more vibrant color, I decided to use this really bright yarn, and I got the idea because I'd seen somebody else knit something with like two very drastically different colors. I want to say it was like blue and yellow, or like purple and yellow, or pistachio and blue, or something like that, where they were just two totally different colors. And when the garment was knitted, you actually couldn't really tell that there were two different colors. Like I would have expected that it looked like a heavily marled piece, but I think that when one strand is a fluffy yarn that's kind of translucent, you get some like additive color mixing going on, where it doesn't just look like two very drastically different marled colors, but it blends together a lot better. So I decided to take a chance and get this yarn because I wanted to use a lace weight, because I wanted the piece to still be pretty light and airy. I knew that this alpaca is thicker than a strand of mohair, so I felt like using that plus a fingering weight might just make it a little heavy. I don't know. So I decided to use a lace weight, and Malabrigo lace had this dark green color, which on its own, I was kind of curious if this color would look good on me, because I think this is quite a popular color nowadays. I don't know that it's really for me. I think it makes me look a little orange on its own, and I don't love looking orange. So yeah, but I knew that I wanted to hold it with something else, and together I think it's pretty nice. It just, darkens this by a few shades, makes it a little bit more saturated. Like I wouldn't say this is overall a saturated color or anything, but it's more like less faded and muted looking than this one. And I found that I think muted colors don't suit me as much as like more vibrant saturated colors. So I think it was kind of a success. And I also really like the feel of this as well. It's, like I said, this yarn by itself didn't love it. It was okay. But this yarn held with this just makes it look so cozy and like fluffy without being itchy. It's still super, super airy and light. And it just feels like a warm hug. And I really like it. And although I was feeling kind of burdened by this yarn, when you have yarn in stash that's so old, but you just don't know what to do with it, it feels a little bit like a burden. At least it does to me. I'm glad I was able to buy something else to hold with it, and now it's just a really, really nice piece. I've tried wearing it with a t-shirt underneath, like I've seen other folks do as well, and I think I like the look. But even on its own, it's very cozy, very comfortable. So yeah, I think that worked well. I might even want to get more of this yarn to knit more things. That's kind of how drastically my opinion changed when I tried holding it with something else versus by itself. So yeah, I think it was a success. In terms of the pattern, I knitted this basically according to pattern. I think my gauge was a little bit bigger, so I sized down one size. I think I knit the extra small to get size small measurements. And the only modification I made was for the I-cord edges. The pattern has you decrease while making the I-cord as to not cause any flaring. I didn't do that, but I just ended up sizing down a needle size, which is what I typically do when I do applied I-cord finishes, and so that worked out just fine. This was a very quick knit. Yeah, it was felt good on my hands, and I just really liked watching it come into fruition. I didn't pay too much attention to the measurements of this garment, because with the Gioia, like I said, I blocked it so many times to make sure everything was the right length. This one, I was a little bit more loosey-goosey about it. Like I did try it on, but I didn't block it numerous times before doing the applied I-cord or anything. And I figured like whatever it ends up with is probably okay. I wasn't going to undo applied I-cord on a fluffy yarn like this. It's just not going to be very easy. So actually this yarn did grow quite a bit. I can't recall if this yarn is superwash or not. I really can't remember, but I do know that before I blocked it, the sleeves are more like this, more bracelet length. And after I blocked it, it kind of covers my hands, which wasn't what I was going for, but I'm actually kind of excited by that. It feels a little bit more cozy. I was trying to see how PetiteKnit knit her sleeve length on like the sample pictures, and I think they typically like scrunched it up a little bit like this, which is a good look still, but I think maybe her length was more bracelet length, but it is all good. I really like it just like this as well. So yeah, I get the hype of this blouse, and I would consider knitting it again, even with like a nice mohair to make it a little bit more luxe. I feel like this is very much like a casual sweater, which I love, but I think PetiteKnit had this like navy sample, which I really was enamored with, because navy is one of my favorite colors. It has to be the right color navy, but when it's the right shade, I love navy, and I think having like a a fluffy navy mohair piece in this cut would be really nice. So yeah, would recommend this pattern and would recommend holding the brushed alpaca silk with another strand of lace weight wool. Okay, what's next? Okay, next I have another sweater to show you, and this is also part of my rapid fire whips that I shared in my last episode, and it is the sweater number 9 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. It's actually like sweater number 9 asterisk because I made quite a number of adaptations to it. So a little bit of backstory. This is actually, I'm re-knitting the first sweater I've ever knitted, like my first for real sweater, besides like a practice sweater out of, craft yarn that was full of holes. This sweater number 9 was my first like sweater, and I had gotten yarn that was very, very nice for me, at least coming from someone who used to only crochet with like cotton. I was really excited to use the Illimani Sabri one, which is a chainette cotton yarn with alpaca fibers blown through it. And then also I bought the Camarosa Midnight Soul, which is like a mohair alternative. It's made of tencel, alpaca, and then maybe like wool or something like that. It's just a little fluffy yarn. And I held them both together to make this sweater number 9, which I love the look of. I really love the design detail of this raglan. I really like the fit. And because I use like a chainette cotton yarn with the fluff, it just draped so beautifully. I love the cut. Just everything about it looked amazing, except for one fatal flaw, which is that I was way too sensitive to wear it. I've always been like, unfortunately, kind of sensitive to animal fibers. I really wish I wasn't, but I am. And I had thought that like alpaca would be more tolerable than mohair. I now know that it really just depends. Like some alpaca feels great, some alpaca is incredibly itchy, some mohair is incredibly itchy, and then some mohair is like incredibly comfortable. So it kind of really depends on the fiber. But anyway, that fiber combination ended up being really uncomfortable to wear. And even if I wear something underneath it, something about it just like made me cough a lot. So anyway, because of that, I didn't really wear the sweater a whole lot. It was also quite warm because of the alpaca. And so I kind of wanted to give that sweater a new life, and I figured I just knit it with just the Illimani Sabri, which is the cotton alpaca blend, which would be a really good material for a more transitional sweater. It gets rid of a strand of yarn that it's itchy to my skin, maybe not to others. And yeah, I thought that that would be a great idea. So I did this, and I will say like knitting it out of a full like cotton, like primarily cotton yarn does obviously completely change the look of the garment. And I think in the end, I feel okay about it. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite thing that I'm so excited to wear, but it's okay. So let me explain. The first thing that I think drastically changed with using the cotton is the funnel neck collar. I think wool definitely stands up a little bit better as a funnel neck. And when I look at pictures of me wearing the old sweater, it kind of cinched around my neck really nicely, whereas this cotton yarn just completely falls apart. It's so wide, and it kind of stands up and it kind of ripples. So it just doesn't look that great. I did put in an elastic, which cinched it in and solved the issue, but I think I need to figure out a better way to secure the elastic because it kept coming apart. I brought this to Japan with me thinking it's a nice, like, casual piece to throw on when it gets chilly in the evenings. But the elastic just like came out and I fixed it thinking like, oh, something was just not tied tightly enough. And then it came out again. So I was like, okay, I'm not just going to keep standing here and trying to like thread this elastic back together. I'll just wear a different jacket. So I got a little bit frustrated. I know that's not really the pattern or the yarn's fault necessarily. I think I do need to look up a better way to secure the knot of the elastic. Like I think I double knotted it and maybe I hold the strands together and then twisted that. I'm not sure what that knot is called, but I tied it the way I would tie string, but I guess elastic is just a lot slipperier. So if y'all have any recommendations on how to like really tie elastic strongly, let me know. I did look it up for like people tying elastics shut for bracelets, and some people use like rubber cement and things like that, but I'm not sure if that's really necessary for something like this. But anyway, that was kind of one of my issues with it. And the second one is that it is quite heavy because it's cotton. So, I mean, it does drape really nicely, but I think when I held it with a fluffy yarn, it was more of an open gauge as far as the cotton was concerned, but now I had to like add a whole other skein of yarn to finish the garment because I took out the fluffy strand. So it does feel like a little bit heavy. And yeah, I think overall it's okay. It's not like the piece I'm most excited to wear, but hopefully it would still turn out to be more wearable than my, too warm, too itchy version of this. I think the biggest issue is the neckline and the elastic. And once I get that figured out, I think it should be mostly okay. I think I also mentioned I made a bunch of modifications to the pattern. Honestly, if you want to knit something like this, you might as well just use the sweater number 9 light pattern. I had already bought the sweater number 9 pattern, so I figured I would just adapt it. So I added short rows to the back neck and also under the yoke, mostly just because I wanted, I think, like 1.5 inches or 2 inches of short rows to bring the back neck up, but I didn't quite have enough room for the top. Like the way I was doing the short rows, I was gonna have to like come way to the front of the neck to have long enough short rows to build that length, and I didn't really want that to mess up the way it looked in the front of my collar. So I ended up adding like maybe 1 inch or so at the back neck, and then I added more below the yoke as well. So at least the back shaping is pretty good. Like my old sweater, that was one of the other issues. The old sweater knitted to pattern just had the back right up a lot, and I didn't really like that. So this one does not right up, which is great. So that was all good. So yeah, that's my sweater number 9 pattern. And we can move on to my next finished object. Okay, I've got 2 more, but those are both small. The first one is a pair of socks. It is the Snowbell socks from the Sandnes Garn booklet, the same Knit Dama booklet. And it is a lace pair of socks. I'll try and open it up so you can see the lace a little bit better. I knitted this using Cascade Heritage. Did I say what yarn I used? Oh, I did. It was Illimani Sabri one. Okay, this is Cascade Heritage, which is a sock yarn in the color Snow, I believe. I had bought this also a long time ago, maybe like a year ago, because I wanted just a white color to hold as a contrast, heel, toe, cuff, for my other socks, but this color just turned out to be too starkly white for most of the colors that I had, and I figured that white would be a good color for Snowbell socks because snow, and so I decided to do that. And yeah, I think I like it. I did try a different ruffle technique. So I had seen that Sari Nordland had released the Summer Girl socks with like a really thick ruffle, and I liked the way it looked, so I tried to do it on here, but I ended up frogging it because it was just a little bit too unbalanced for a sock like this that had this like dainty little lace detail. So I ended up doing the little teeny tiny ruffles as called for in the pattern. And one tip I'll give is just that when you're binding off this ruffle, you really have to bind off quite loosely. It does say so in the pattern, but I think at first I bound off a little too tight. So the ruffle like didn't look that ruffly. It was more just kind of like it just wasn't as ruffly, you know. Imagine like somebody has started to try to make a ruffle, but it didn't ruffle. It was too just blobby. So yeah, binding off loosely really helps. I wasn't really sure how to block it. I tried to like smooth it out to block it, but who knows if that really worked. But yeah, I think overall the effect is nice. I also modified the heel. The pattern may have called for just a regular short row heel, but to be honest, I could not understand what the pattern was trying to say for the heel. So, I mean, maybe I could have understood if I tried harder, but I was like, I'm just going to do a fish lips kiss heel because I know it fits me and it will be just fine. Yeah, the lace pattern is really nice. It's pretty easy to knit after you figure it out, but I will say the pattern, I wish it did do a little bit more to help. Like at one point, you have one chart for so it's knit toe up, and you have one chart for this part, because the top of the foot and then the bottom of the sole of the feet the sole of the feet have no pattern, so the chart only shows like the front. But then at a certain point when you get to the cuff or the leg, you have to knit, lace all around, and it provided you another chart, and it just said like, make sure the 2 charts align. And I was like, okay. I mean, I figured it out in the end, but I think it took me a little bit of time, and I would have just appreciated if they just helped you figure out how to match the chart. I mean, they were only 2 sizes, so I don't think it would be too much to ask to just have some guidance on how to match the charts. But I guess it's okay. I figured it out. I had knitted this on trip to Arizona in September. I knitted a good bit of one sock and I finished the other sock at home. And yeah, I've been wearing it. It's been nice. It's like a shorter sock than I'm used to, but I still really like it. And yeah, it's super cute. I wear it inside my Birkenstocks, like the Arizona style Birkenstocks where you can put your whole foot in there. I don't know why I'm explaining how sandals work, but yeah, it's a good little sock. It's my first time knitting socks that didn't have a contrast heel, toe, and cuff, and it's so much more simple when you don't have to weave in that many more ends. So that was nice. And yeah, cute little socks. Okay, my very last finished object is a pumpkin, and I am really excited about it. This is the Everlast pumpkin by Claire Garland. I saw this on Ravelry because Athena from the Seedling Stitch podcast had knitted a pumpkin, and I was like, that is so darn cute. And she noted that like this pumpkin, unlike the many other pumpkin patterns out there, has different size like segments of the pumpkin. So you can see this one's quite a large segment and this one's kind of small. And so it just looks a lot more natural as opposed to a very uniform pumpkin. So I was kind of drawn to that. The yarn is special. So the yarn is Noro Kureyon, which I bought in Japan. I know you can buy that in the US too, but I just kind of like saw it at the store, the same store I was getting those buttons from. And there was a lot of different yarns and I really wanted one, but I didn't know what garment to make and I didn't have that much time to sit there and deliberate. So I saw this colorway. It was so autumnal and I thought, you know what, let's make a home decor item. I've wanted to make a pumpkin for so long, so I just grabbed the Noro Kureyon to make a pumpkin pattern. And then when I got home, I saw Athena's project on Ravelry and really thought this was the perfect pattern. So I kind of jumped right in and it was a really nice experience. So it's a free pattern, by the way. So, and then Claire Garland has an Instagram reel that walks through some of the key steps, which I'd never done before. Like you have, your chain and then you knit the pumpkin. And then you also use like another yarn to weave into these like furrows to tighten it and really define each furrow in the pumpkin. So I hadn't done that before. So that was pretty fun to try out. And then the stem is actually knitted continuously. Actually, so I think you're supposed to obviously switch to like a stem like color for the stem, but this yarn, it's obviously self-striping. It's 100% wool, worsted weight, self-striping, beautiful, natural looking Noro yarn. When it got up to here, it naturally transitioned from the orange to the tan, so I just kept it. I didn't have to break the yarn or anything. I just kept knitting this little stem. It is seamed, and at the bottom, you kind of like cinch in you cinch in it at the bottom, but I actually broke the yarn when I was trying to cinch it in, so I ended up just kind of adding another piece of yarn and felting it shut. This is a 1-ply, so it does break like relatively easily, and you had to cinch pretty tight because I stuffed it like pretty nice. I try to stuff it a lot with polyfill so that it's, not like deflated looking, but because of that the yarn wasn't quite strong enough to really cinch it in, so I ended up just felting it with a felting needle, which preview to my acquisitions, but I think it ended up looking pretty sturdy. It looks pretty good. I think I used less than half of the whole ball of the Kureyon, so I should have enough to make another one if I so desire. Maybe this year, maybe next year. The other stripes of this yarn are super different. Like there's a green color in the yarn that I haven't even gotten to. Let me see if I know where the yarn is. Okay, here it is. So it's fallen apart a little bit, but you can see there's like so many more beautiful colors, like this green, this red, and more of this like brown and yellow. So this will be like a totally different pumpkin. I would love to knit another one. So maybe this year, maybe next year. We'll see how like autumnal I'm still feeling at the end of this year. I will also say that I actually blocked the pumpkin, the knitted like material before I seamed it and before I stuffed it, just because, I know that this yarn blocks so beautifully and blooms really beautifully. And so I decided to just give it a chance. So I did soak it in some wool wash before I seamed it. And I think that was a good call because, I mean, I'll try and show it up close. It's such a gorgeous yarn. I mean, to be honest, I think I have kind of a hard time figuring out how to wear so many colors like this, but in a little decor item, are you kidding me? It is so perfect. It is such a cute little pumpkin. I love it. And in fact, the other day I just like kind of put it somewhere, but then my boyfriend was like, oh, you should display it more prominently. And we had bought like a little Bulbasaur when we were in Japan, and then he kind of just put it on top of here. So I'm like, it's a Bulbasaur. I was pretty tickled by that. So this is kind of how we've been displaying this pumpkin. So yeah, that's my little fall pumpkin finished object. Okay, so I'm starting to lose the light here, so I just went to turn on like an indoor light. So I hope the lighting is still okay. I have been talking for, I feel like, an eternity, and I've just finished the finished objects, and that's what I get when I don't film very frequently, because I just end up having so many things to share. So maybe we'll just go through whips like in a rapid fire fashion, and then I'll go through acquisitions briefly, and then hopefully I'll get to film not too long from now, and then I'll get to, you know, have a slower pace. So, okay, finish up works in progress number 1. What should I show first? I have another pair of socks. So these are my cozy autumn socks. I finished one and I've got the other one in progress. I'll show you the finished one. This is a free pattern by This Handmade Life. I've been eyeing it for a long time, but just gotten around to knitting it. It's not blocked. I actually don't have a sock blocker, so it doesn't really get too much better than this, but hopefully you can kind of see there are all these faux cables. You don't have to actually cable at all. It's all done using just strategic increases, decreases, and eyelets. And I think it looks really pretty. The color I used is, the yarn I used is Malabrigo Ultimate Sock in the color Caramel. Again, stash I've had for a really long time, but just recently started to knit. And this is definitely one of those other like fall knits that I've had in my mind for, you know, long before fall, but I also felt like I couldn't really, or didn't want to cast it on too early because it's so distinctively fall, you know? So yeah, it's got a cute little 2x2 rib, I think. And then these cables, and I did a heel flap and gusset for the first time in a long time. My first 2 pairs of socks, I did heel flap and gusset. And then when I learned the fish lips kiss method, I just started to do that because it was, you don't have to do any like gusset decreases. But since this was called for in the pattern, and I do like the way that heel flap and gusset looks, I decided to just go for it. And I think it looks great. It also wasn't as finicky to knit as I remembered. I ended up putting all the instep stitches on one needle and then just the top of the foot stitches on the other. Or is that the instep? Maybe the top of the foot is the instep, and then the bottom like heel stitches and sole stitches, I put them all on one needle so that when you switch needles is when you do the gusset decreases. And for me, that was a lot easier to remember because the trickiest thing for me, I remember from knitting heel flap and gusset, is that I would just like forget that I have to make another decrease so that the rate, it wouldn't be even along this like gusset. But it really wasn't an issue for me. It was really intuitive. I don't know if that's just that I'm more of an experienced knitter and I can more easily read my knitting and tell like, oh, there was a decrease in the last row, so you don't have to do it again, sort of thing. But yeah, it turned out really nicely. I also did the Suzanne Bryan method for closing up holes. I think I shared that I did that for a raglan I did recently. I can't remember which one now. Was it the Gioia cardigan? In one of the raglans I did, I used that method, and there were no holes, so I used the same thing on the gusset, and there are also no holes, so nothing to really having to sew in. And again, because there's no contrast cuffs, heels, or toes, there were so few ends to weave in, just like the one end at the beginning and the end, and it was great. I love knitting this. Knitting lace is always so addicting. So the second one, I am up to, I think I'm finished the gusset decreases now, so I'm just going to finish the foot and toe, and then I can wear my cozy autumn socks. Yes, you can see I'm using a magic loop, 40-inch magic loop. These are 2.25 centimeters. I knitted the size small. There were 2 sizes for the sock, and yeah, it's going great. Love it. Okay, next work in progress is kind of probably gonna get put on ice a little bit, is my Elisabeth blouse. So here's what I have so far. can you even see anything? There's so many cords hanging from it, but this is the collar that's going to get folded in, and it's, I guess when you fold it like this, it looks like there's nothing, but there's actually so many layers of fabric. But yes, this is the Elisabeth blouse. I am using what's this called? Tropical Lane IDL, which is a merino yarn. It's the same, it's labeled as a fingering weight yarn, but the weight is the same as Filcolana Pernilla, which is a DK weight, and this is also one of the recommended yarns in the pattern. The other recommended yarns obviously are like Cardiff Cashmere, which is so luxurious and very fancy, and then also you can do one strand of merino and one strand of mohair, but I decided to just do this one because I had it in stash and I kind of bought it to make this. At first I was really concerned about the gauge because at 23 stitches, I thought this might be a little bit too holy, but after I blocked it, I think it looks a lot better. Like when you're just up against it, it doesn't, like unless you have a lot of air, like a lot of space and there's like light going through, you can't really see it. Like it doesn't really look that like holy. So I think it's okay. I did knit the collar on the plane on the way to Japan, and you know, they dimmed the cabin lights and it was kind of dark, so I don't think my tension was the smoothest. And so because it's the collar, I thought that it might be too obvious. There is a couple of rows where, yeah, the tension just doesn't look great. I can't, nothing to really say about that besides it doesn't look great. But I'm not sure if it's worth like undoing or not. For now, I blocked it. It looks okay. I'm hoping that as you get farther away, like you can't really notice. Also, you know, I'm knitting by hand. I'm not a machine, so maybe some of that is expected, but I'm really just, I think I'm going to put this on hold and work on the other things that I really want to work on and see how I feel about it later on. Because sometimes if I think something looks terrible, then I look back at it later and I'm like, oh, that is actually totally fine. So maybe that's the case and I'll keep going, or maybe I decide that I don't want to knit this anymore, or if I want to use the yarn for something else, I'll do that. So yeah, I think this is the current progress, but I'm going to put it on pause. So far, I really like the construction. Knitting this collar was pretty fun. It was pretty good plain knitting, I think, in that you don't have to think a lot. It's just a lot, like a big like stockinette tube, really, besides the provisional cast on. Besides the fact that it was dark and hard to see, and my stitches, therefore, are not super even. But yeah, we shall see what comes of this. Now, the work in progress that I am most excited about is this. It is another vest number 2 spring edition. Actually, let me come right back. So if you've seen my previous episodes, I had knitted a different vest number 2 spring edition, which I just brought over here to show you. It's this one, and I love it so much. I think this is my most worn knit, like hands down. Every time I've gone on a trip, I brought this and I've worn it, and I really enjoyed wearing it. So I just absolutely adore it. I think it's so easy to wear, and I love the fabric. I had used knitting for all of merino and soft silk mohair, and so every time I wear it, I'm just like, oh, I wish I had another one in like a brighter color, like a more statement color. And so I finally decided to just do it. I actually have been knitting on this in a pretty focused manner for quite a while now. When I came back from Japan a couple of weeks ago, I just decided to order it because I brought that sweater vest with me to Japan, loved wearing it, and figured that, you know what, I should just get another one. So I had really wanted to make it in this like red-orange color. That's kind of all the rage nowadays. And this specific color is the Knitting for Olive blood orange with, in merino, with the soft silk mohair. So these two yarns. And yeah, I think it's great. I was a little bit, when I was looking for red-orange yarns, I really want to make sure it's not like totally orange. Because I don't know, canonically, I feel like orange is not a great color for me. But I don't know if that's true. Maybe I should try on some like more orange pieces, like the Hokkaido colorway I was eyeing, but I think I just like to see how it looks on against my skin before buying it. But this red orange, I kind of took a chance on, and I think it turns out to be just the right blend of red and orange. So, yep, I think this time I sized down on needle size, because last time my gauge was a little bit big. So instead of using the 4.5 millimeter needle, like the pattern called for, I sized down to 4 millimeter because my gauge, I tend to be a loose knitter, but for some reason, now my gauge is a little small, so I don't know. I actually didn't do a gauge swatch for this. I figured like I've already done the same pattern with the same yarn combination that I can just kind of go right ahead and did what I did before, and kind of, you start with the back panel anyway, so I was kind of using that as a gauge swatch. This is the first time I think that I haven't done a gauge swatch, like as far as I can remember. I almost always do a gauge swatch. I don't usually mind. But this time I was like, you know what? I don't need to do a gauge swatch. So I cast it on a medium, figuring that I could always just like adapt as I go. And in the end, because my gauge was a little bit small, I ended up just doing a true medium, thinking that if I'm somewhere between a small and a medium, it's a good fit for me. The other vest that I showed that I previously knit is also like kind of a blend between a small and a medium. And so yeah, here it is. I'm already onto the ribbing at the bottom, and then the next, after I finish that, it'll just be the neckline and then the armholes, and I'm so excited to wear it. I'm really looking forward to this. I will always just wear the other vest over a white tee, and I think it looks great, and I think I can do the same with this one. I did also see that True Lane recently knitted a orange slipover as well, and it looked really pretty, and she wore it with a dress, which I think is a great idea. I don't have a dress quite like that, but some ideas for you if you're also in the orange slipover market. But yeah, I'm very excited about this one. Okay, so I think that's all of my whips. I finished a lot of things and then was really focused on this one. So maybe next we can talk about acquisitions and plans. So I won't go over the things that I've acquired that I've already like made into something. So just the new things. First is I got a couple extra balls of this blood orange Knitting for Olive Merino, and I really want to knit a hat. I'm currently thinking maybe the Spur hat by Hiromi Nagasawa. I think I'm remembering that correctly. Or I might knit the Ole hat by Susan Muller. Yeah, I think this color as a hat would be very, very exciting. So if you have any other pattern recommendations, I'm open to it. It's I can hold it single-stranded. Like, I think the Spur hat, it would be single-stranded, but then for the Ole hat, I probably would have to hold it double. So that's one acquisition. Another one, let's talk about the most exciting one, shall we? The one that we got in Japan, by we I mean me, is this wall garden pullover kit. So I'll show the kit. It's going to be a bit of plastic crinkling that I'll try and silence. Ta-da! This is the wall garden pullover sweater kit, and I am so excited to knit it. If you want to get a sense of what it looks like, here's a very small picture, but you can also go to Athena from Seedling Stitches podcast, and she had knitted this earlier today, and her version looks really beautiful, and I'm so excited. I bought this when I was in Japan. In that same store, I got those buttons and the Noro Kureyon yarn, and I actually didn't think that I would be able to get it. Like, I had been eyeing this pattern for a really long time, and you can only get it as part of the kit, and they do sell it online on the Puppy online store, but you have to pay like $40 or $50 of shipping because it's international shipping from Japan. And so I kept thinking like maybe I could get it while I'm in Japan, and I wasn't really expecting it because Puppy, the store that sells this kit, does have physical stores, but I didn't know if I would get to be able to go, and even if I did get to go, I didn't know if it would be in stock, so I kind of had my hopes pretty low. But when I went to the other store, it's called Odakaya or Okadaya. I think it's Odakaya. It's kind of maybe like analogous to a Michael's, but it's very different. But it's, I guess, what you might consider like a big box type of store where they have not just yarn, fabric things, but also like all sorts of other crafts. But yeah, they had a yarn floor, and I was looking at some kits, and I saw some like Fair Isle vests that looked similar to the other kits that Puppy Yarn offers. So I was like, oh, let me just take a quick look. And then what do you know? Among that like little small section of kits, they had this one. And so I just gasped and hugged it and immediately knew I had to go buy it. And so that's what I did. It is a completely Japanese pattern. So I've never knitted a Japanese pattern before, but there are a lot of like resources online to kind of help you figure it out. It's mostly charted, and the pattern is given in a graphical manner. There's not a lot of text. So for that reason, you don't really need to know that much Japanese, but there are still a couple of things that like Google Translate doesn't translate very well. So comparing it to like the online resources is how I can tell if something says like 1x1 rib. When Google translated it, it was like 1 times rubber stitch or something like that, which, you know, on its own, it doesn't really tell you that it's 1x1 rib, you know? But yeah, also Athena's video has been really useful. I kind of watched her podcast video where she talked about her knitting experience to get a sense of what all goes on. It is going to be a pretty involved project. Like you can see, there's a lot of color work, and it's knitted flat and then seamed, which I've never knitted a sweater that's seamed. I don't particularly love knitting like seaming. I actually really don't love seaming. And yeah, I haven't done intarsia either. So it'll be an adventure, but I'm up to the challenge. And I think my goal for this is actually just to not rush through it. It was just it's like a very special pattern, and it's like a memento of my trip. And as excited as I am to wear it, I really want to enjoy the journey of knitting this and not just rush through it. Because I think when I have a goal, I can tend to just, you know, really laser in on finishing something as quickly as possible, but I really want to enjoy it. So that's kind of like an anti-goal that I'm setting for the sweater. But yeah, I think I just really want to enjoy the process. And if I get to finishing it by the end of 2024, it's all good. I'm happy, you know? So yeah, here is a gauge swatch that I made using the main color. And I'm not sure if this is too holy or not. I think it might be okay. The thing is, the pattern calls for 110 centimeters of a bust circumference, and I think I like it a little bit more oversized. So 120 is like, 110 is 20 centimeters of ease on me, but I think I may want like 25 centimeters of ease. So I sized slightly up in needle size. The needle size it calls for is like 4.8 millimeters, because it's a Japanese needle size. So I could use 4.5 or 5. And this swatch I use 5 millimeters. I think I might end up doing another swatch in 4.5 just to see how it compares, so I can pick a fabric that I like. Of course, knowing that when I start doing color work, the gauge might change a little bit. I don't know if intarsia changes your gauge as much as like stranded knitting, but I know stranded knitting can tighten up your gauge a bit, so we'll have to see. But yeah, I am still kind of like hoping and praying that I figure things out. But yeah, it'll be an adventure. It'll be fun. Okay, another acquisition / plan that I'll share is, let's see, there are, I guess, 2 parts to it. So I saw that Lovecraft had a sale a while ago, and I decided to pick up this Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo in the color Ome. I know the light is really going here, so I don't know if this is showing very clearly, so I'll put a picture if not. And then I intended to hold it with a mohair to knit like a cozy little cardigan, like the champagne cardigan. So then when I was in Scotland in July, I think I mentioned that I went to Scotland in July. If not, I did that. And I did that to celebrate my birthday. And when I was there, I was in Edinburgh and I visited Bee Inspired Fibers. And I picked up this Isager silk mohair. And I can't find the ball band anymore, but it's the pink color of the Isager silk mohair. So I can use it to hold it together. And here is a swatch of what that looks like. I had debated whether to hold this with a white mohair or a pink mohair, but decided with the pink because I think a pink cardigan would be really nice, and I could stand for this to be pinker, and also the store was out of white, so kind of made that decision easy for me. Okay, my battery died, so I am back now. I was saying that I specifically wanted to get the Isager mohair because I am still kind of on the lookout for a mohair that feels nice against my skin. Like I said, a lot of the mohairs I've tried like don't feel great on my skin, but I know I like the Knitting for Olive, and I know I like Lang Lace. And I heard a lot of good things about the Isager, so I thought I'd try it, and I knew that it would be cheaper in Europe. So I picked this up, and it is really soft. I think it'll feel great against my skin. So yeah, I'm glad I got to pick it up when I was there. So with this, my gauge is about 17 stitches, and I think it still would work okay for the champagne cardigan, which is an 18 stitch gauge. I was really considering the cardigan number 8, I believe, by My Favorite Things Knitwear, because I love the pockets and I kind of like the drop shoulder, but that one is like a 15 stitch gauge, which means that I would really have to like adapt the size, which of course may change the proportions of the sleeves and everything. So I don't know. I asked my boyfriend's opinion and he really likes the cardigan number 8. And I think I do agree, but I just don't know if like it would be too much mental effort to have to adapt the pattern for such a different gauge that I have. So yeah, I might end up just using the champagne cardigan for just ease of use purposes, and I can also just add pockets if I wanted to, if I have enough yarn. But yeah, I'm really excited by this yarn combination. I think it looks great. I feel like Noro yarns held with mohair is such a nice look in my opinion. I know that PetiteKnit used this for her terrazzo sweater as well, like this specific yarn combination. I don't know if it's the Izzy or mohair, but the Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo held with a strand of mohair, and I think it just looks really nice. I love all the different colors in it. Yeah, all I have to say is I really like this, and I'm really excited to knit this. If you have any cardigan recommendations besides the champagne cardigan, for like something with a 17-ish stitch gauge, let me know. I'm open to it because I haven't cast it on just yet. Yeah, oh, and I also did buy buttons for this, but I'm actually not sure where I put them, but I will try and put a picture if I can find it. They're like these black, grayish, like tortoiseshell buttons, and I think they look really beautiful, and I'm really excited to sew this on here. I do wish I brought the swatch with me when I went to Japan so I can like compare the buttons, but I didn't do that, and there were so many different options that, I don't know, I just picked one, and I think it looks pretty good. So yeah, that's it for that. And since my camera is really dying and the light is going, I think this is a good time to wrap up my very long episode with so many things that I had to share. So like I said, I really hope that I'll get to film again like not too long from now, so that I won't have way too many things to share all at once. I think I actually really do enjoy filming. It's just the editing that feels a little bit intimidating to me because of how long it takes. You know, like I work all day on my computer, and after all of that, I just don't love like continuing to sit on my computer for like 5 to 7 hours to edit a video. And so yeah, I think that is the one thing that I'm hoping to streamline further so it doesn't feel like such a big barrier to produce and put out a whole episode, because I really do love like recording an episode and then chatting with you all about it in the comments. So yeah, no promises, but I will try to film again soon. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to hear about what you've been working on and what you're excited to knit in this season that's coming up. And if you like this video, I would appreciate if you'd consider subscribing if you haven't already, and giving this video a like. And I hope that I will see you again in the next one very soon. Bye everyone.